Hello, I'm Infamous Fear. What's that? It's time for Infamous Queer!
Pride, 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 darling, darling, pride, pride 95!
Some people in this life take to the streets for a living, performers and those that sell their artisan crafts. Other people are streetwalkers who sell their artisan arts. Everyone, pull up your pants and make sure you know what you're asking for when you look at that man standing in the doorway, because it's time to talk about male prostitution! Well, more specifically, male prostitution through the field of cinema. Usually male prostitutes are a one-off joke, probably some guy standing on a street corner wearing fishnets and a wig, but every now and again a movie comes along that makes the hustler the main character. And the two films I'm going to look at today have more in common than just titles beginning with the letter M.
One boy for sale.
Midnight Cowboy came out in 1969 and was the only X-rated movie to get Best Picture. Strangely, it's only rated M15+ now, the equivalent of PG-13 as far as I know. It also stars Jon Voight, back when he still had a career and didn't have to star in the likes of Super Baby's Baby Geniuses too. Guess his career eventually got fucked more than his character in this movie did. And now, the plot. Joe Buck is a naive young guy with a bit of a cowboy fetish who comes to the conclusion that there's money to be made in New York, selling himself to rich ladies, even though most of the clientele for any form of prostitution consists of men, and he really should have thought of that before he decided to move into the profession. He goes to New York on a bus, and it turns out that he's an absolutely rubbish prostitute who ends up giving money to one of his clients when she kicks up a stink, rather than the other way around. He then runs into Dustin Hoffman's character, Ratso Rizzo, who is a greasy petty thief and con man.
Hey, I'm walking here! I'm walking here! Up yours, you son of a bitch! You don't talk me that way! Get out of here!
Rizzo cons him out of $20 and sends him to a pimp, saying that he needs management if he's going to make a living as a hustler. However, when Joe gets to the hotel room, it turns out that the pimp is just a greasy old guy who wants to have sex with him. Joe runs away and tries to track down Rizzo. Long story short, the two men pair up, with Rizzo acting as a manager for Joe. Joe moves into Rizzo's shitty accommodation and notices the man is becoming steadily sicker. Rizzo persuades Joe that what he needs is to go to Florida, and then when they're on the bus together heading there, he dies. The end! Fast forward 22 years and we come to My Own Private Idaho, which came out in 1991 and was directed by Gus Van Sant. It also starred River Phoenix when he still wasn't dead, an infamous queer favourite, Keanu Reeves. Yes, I've made references to this movie before. All ye who wish to see Keanu Reeves as a man whore, the time has come, for this is the movie. Mike Waters is a gay narcoleptic prostitute on a quest to find his mother. He hangs around with a group of other prostitutes and their frequent client, a grotty older man named Bob. One of the prostitutes is Scott Favor, the son of a senator, who does the job merely to piss off his father, whereas Mike does it because he can't really do anything else.
How do we get home?
Together, the men like to reenact Henry IV.
I will no longer be guilty of this sin! This sanguine coward, this horseback breaker, this huge hairy
Starfish! Breath to utter what lies in a tailor's yardstick! You bootcase! You vile punk!
Mike gets Scott to go with him around the countryside on a road trip back to Idaho. They talk to Mike's older brother and father, it's the same guy! And then end up flying to Italy. However, no matter where they go, they always manage to just miss finding Mike's mother. Scott suddenly turns into a dickhead and abandons him for a wife and a respectable life, and Mike ends up passing out on a highway where he's picked up by some guy in a car. The end. Bleak, huh? And now it's time to hear those two wonderful words which all of you people ache for. Compare and contrast! I was pretty surprised by the amount of similarities between the two movies. There are a whole host of things that led me to believe that Gus Van Sant was visually and thematically inspired by Midnight Cowboy, beyond the whole male prostitute buddy movie thing. Our blonde prostitute protagonist from rural USA. Both of our protagonists move to bigger cities to become hustlers after leaving towns where they're met with childhood trauma. Joe Buck was gang raped and his girlfriend taken away to an insane asylum, and Mike Waters, although his childhood isn't detailed, seems to have been neglected, even if we completely ignore the fact that any mother who chooses to sleep with her own son probably isn't a very good parent. They're both fairly innocent people themselves, despite dealing in a line of work considered sordid. Now this is what you call a hooker with a heart of gold. Mike is played as a heartbreakingly sad, world-weary character, a genuinely nice person with the capacity for love, who has been fucked over by life in more ways than one. Joe, on the other hand, is extremely painfully naive. He's a happy man with good spirits, but unlike Mike, the experience of his abuse hasn't served to provide him with any cynicism. On the contrary, he has absolutely no idea what he's getting himself into.
I warn you, Joe Buck. I'm gonna use you. I'm gonna run you ragged. You're a wonderful boy. You and me, we're gonna have fun together.
Both the characters are extremely vulnerable. Joe is an absolutely terrible prostitute, as opposed to Mike, who can get a man to pay to fillet him, and is conned out of money multiple times throughout the movie. He seems almost incapable of reading people's intentions, and it's a wonder he manages to pick anyone up at all. It's this naivety that people prey on, including those that purport to like him or to be his friends. Luckily, by the end of the movie, he realises he's a terrible hustler and decides to do something else. Mike isn't crippled by naivety, but he has a severe handicap in the form of his narcolepsy. As funny as it might sound, falling asleep at odd and inopportune times isn't terribly convenient, and often leaves him open to being robbed or worse. The movie doesn't really delve into this, but when you think about it, there's a strong possibility that unscrupulous clients might rape an unconscious prostitute. Since who would know or care? No one would believe a prostitute testifying to being raped, and since Mike is unconscious the whole time, he probably wouldn't even know it was happening.
For some reason, I'm forgetting a German guy named Hans.
Well, you were sleeping.
So how much do you make off me when I'm asleep?
What, you think I sell your body while you're asleep?
Luckily, for much of the movie, a close-knit community of fellow hustlers take charge in keeping an eye out for him and keeping him safe. It's not entirely clear why Joe decided to go into prostitution, except out of some misguided idea that there was an oversupply of women who were willing to pay sexually able, good-looking young men for sex.
There's a lot of rich women back there, Ralph. Begging for it, paying for it too.
Yeah?
Yeah, hell yeah. And the men, they're mostly tutti fruities.
Mike, on the other hand, is in prostitution because he has no choice, and his clients for the most part sure as hell aren't nice-looking rich women. He doesn't really have the level of education or the connections to get him a job where he'd get some kind of disability support. And for someone who keeps unavoidably strange hours, prostitution is the only way he can get enough money to survive. His dark-haired, slightly morally bankrupt buddy/potential love interest. We are first introduced to Ratso Rizzo when he cons Joe out of some money. He's a low-down, scummy kind of character, as opposed to the blonde, hokey, all-American Joe, who was naive enough to trust him. Ratso is crippled by polio and supports himself with petty theft, meaning he's lower down the chain of street scum than Joe is. He's also chronically ill with an incurable cough of death. The key thing about Ratso is that his character starts out as a greasy little low-life con-man, and then he's given development and characterisation, meaning that we begin to see how the two men connect with each other. By the end of the movie, he's not really a morally bankrupt character at all, and he and Joe only part when he dies. Ratso and Joe's relationship is a little ambiguous. There's a degree of suggestion that there's some kind of homosexual element to it, one-sided or not, and people sure are quick to assume the two are boyfriends.
Well, you want me to stay here. You after something. What you after? You don't look like no fag.
Don't tell me you two are a couple.
What in the hell starts with why?
Well, it can end in Y. Gay ends in Y. Gay, Faye. Is that your problem, baby?
Scott Favor is my Own Private Idaho's equivalent of Rizzo, except for the fact that he's maybe a complete inversion. He's not crippled at all because Mike is the disabled character in this. In fact, he's wealthy and privileged, and he's only in prostitution as some kind of a bizarre lark to annoy his senator father.
We have a message for you from your father. He'd like to see you as soon as possible.
Fuck you. What do you care about money? Shit, you got plenty of money. Why don't you just go ahead and do whatever it is that you do? You can only imagine what that is for free.
Actually, Mike is right. I am going to inherit money. A lot of money.
From the beginning, Scott comes across as a caring character who loves Mike, at least as a friend if not as a boyfriend. Many cute press photos came out of this. Mike definitely loves him.
I only have sex with a guy for money.
Yeah, I know.
And two guys can't love each other.
Well, I don't know. I mean, for me, I could love someone even if I, wasn't paid for it. I love you, and you don't pay me.
Mike.
I really want to kiss you, man.
However, the moral bankruptcy rears its ugly head at the end of the film when Scott suddenly turns into a dickhead and abandons his friend for a woman and a wealthy life. Possibly because he's Keanu, he's actually an emotionless robot, but it's still rather like having the rug pulled out from under your feet, making this an even more painful dissolution of homoerotic buddies than Midnight Cowboy's decision to kill one of them off. Imagery and thematic elements. Flashbacks? You've got them.
You love me, Joe? Do you love me? Joe? Joe?
Don't worry. Everything's going to be all right. Don't worry. Everything's going to be all right.
Using TV as a device to reflect the themes of the movie? Sure!
Do you think God is dead?
Suppose we just don't talk about it anymore.
What would you say if I wanted to take my mother along?
Oh my God! It even makes black whiter.
Bring your knees up. Come on out. And there.
Isn't this really a case of conning a lot of lonely people?
Well, lonely people, yes. Who else would do it? A woman with a lot of children wouldn't have time.
Contrasting sexual themes with rampant displays of cheap and tacky Americana and religious ephemera? Check!
I've prayed in the streets. I've prayed in the saloons. I've prayed in the toilets. It don't matter where, so long as he gets that prayer.
A cowboy is singing.
American themes and imagery and the broken ideal of the American dream manifesting itself in the main character ending up lost and alone at the end of the movie? Yep! Strange drugged women in diners? Society's rejects living in an abandoned warehouse? A last-ditch effort to sleep with a client in order to get money for travelling which ends badly? Along with the idea of rural versus metropolitan and the American dream through the eyes of two characters who have been completely rejected by mainstream American society, there's also the theme of the road running through both movies. In Midnight Cowboy, the idea of the cowboy is a reflection of the theme of manifest destiny and the idea of roaming and never truly being home. On the other hand, Mike spends most of My Own Private Idaho looking for his mother, and by extension his home, only to find that she's always one step ahead of him on her own journey, meaning that he'll never truly find a place where he belongs. So more about road movies. Road movies typically end in 4 ways. 1. The characters reach the end of their journey, and having accomplished their quest, they return home. 2. The characters reach their destination and set up a new home there. 3. The characters get to the end of the road and they realise that there is no way that they can continue, seeing as they were travelling because they were outlaws or rejects of society, and so the only possible conclusion is them dying or being killed. 4. The characters realise that they can never stop travelling and the quest must continue long after the movie has ended. In Midnight Cowboy, it's not clear whether Joe will set up a new life in Florida or head home to Texas because there's nowhere else that he can go. For Rizzo, however, the journey is well and truly over. In My Own Private Idaho, Scott is lucky enough to opt for ending 1, with the added benefit of getting his inheritance and having a respectable life, complete with a female love interest. Mike, however, ends up with possibly the worst ending, ending 4.
This road will never end. It probably goes all around the world.
something so brutal about the idea of this character, who has been completely destroyed by the world around him, never being able to find any kind of peace or belonging or love, and when he has the merest fragment of it, having it whisked away from him. Movies about male prostitution have a lot in common, huh? Both movies hold up pretty well, and I'd recommend them both. Midnight Cowboy only really hints at homosexuality, apart from the three male Johns who are portrayed as being pretty pathetic, but the bond between Rizzo and Joe is cute. It's just funny how that movie was considered so shocking back then and got such a high rating, when it doesn't really show anything that explicit. It's got a slightly more linear and comprehensible style than My Own Private Idaho, apart from the occasional flashbacks and use of television footage to comment on the story. If you can't stand art movies, I'd recommend this one over the other one. My Own Private Idaho? Because of the slightly annoying random bits of Shakespeare, I can't really say it's my favourite gay movie, but Mike Waters is the ultimate tragic gay character. He's played with an incredibly vulnerable, heartrending touch by River Phoenix, who died very shortly after this movie was made. Your mileage may vary on Keanu, but at least he's given a good actor to bounce off, and being cold and unemotional works here. If you'd like a happy ending and a cute, cuddly gay romance, then My Own Private Idaho probably isn't the movie for you. But if you'd like to see the most sympathetic gay character of all time, and Keanu Reeves playing a man whore, go and see it. In any case, it's a heck of a lot more interesting than Jerry. So that was My Own Midnight Private Idaho Cowboy, and if you'll excuse me, I'm going to take a nap.
Male prostitution seems to be my only option.